Hello, and welcome to the latest Raise podcast, the No BS Fundraising Podcast. I am super excited today to have my new friend, Martin Kõiva, joining us to take us through basically the whole story of his business, ultimately called Klaus, but had a few other names along the way, which we'll be possibly discussing a bit, and his various fundraising rounds with a deep dive and a bit of like an anatomy of his first kind of seed funding rounds with hopefully the benefit of quite a lot of hindsight. Martin, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about you and the business you built, and just give us a little intro.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. My name is Martin, originally from Estonia. Me and my co-founders and the team built a customer support quality improvement platform, eventually also AI enabled. We started back in 2018 and ended up selling the business to Zendesk in 2024.
So let's just do a kind of quick fire across a couple points and questions. So let's just start at the most meta level as it relates to fundraising. As your first challenge, fundraising in one word, take as long as you need to think about it. What's the one word that you feel when you think about the act of fundraising as a founder?
Pitching.
Pitching.
Yeah, I feel like those are the moments where things get decided. That's what everything else, like that's the culmination always, or the tipping point, and then you live or die based on the pitch.
Yeah, fair enough. And what about the kind of biggest myth that you ever kind of either felt going into fundraising that you ultimately kind of dispelled, or you think a lot of other people believe that they shouldn't? Is there anything that you think is just widely thought of, but actually wrong?
I think a lot of people that haven't done it before assume that it's like a very serious and rational thing, whereas I think in reality it's more emotional than rational.
Super interesting. Tell me a little bit more.
I think, and God, I'm blanking on the name of the book, but there is some kind of book that talks about fundraising that I've read multiple times, that I've somebody smart recommended to me, but I read it like now years ago, and that talks about it in a way that it's like your kind of reptilian brain is really in charge, and then like the rational side of your brain is basically figures out how to rationalize the thing that your gut tells you. So I feel like that's a lot of what happens in fundraising, is that on both sides, the emotions and instincts like do the actual decision making, and then it gets rationalized. Like the signal actually comes from more from the emotional side and subconscious, and then later it gets packaged in a way that seems to be very rational.
I agree. Absolutely. Do you feel that changes or evolves alongside the founder maturing and evolving and the rounds getting bigger and more later stage, or do you feel that stays fairly similar?
For me personally, I think it did evolve, because I thought earlier that, like having like financial projections and things like that, like that's what matters or matters more. But so we went through 4 fundraising rounds, and I think like after each round, it like the proportions changed for me. Like the signaling became more important, and the more you go through these cycles, you understand that my favorite thing is like financial projections at pre-seed, which are just I guess they are in an Excel file, but fantasy, right? I think, yes, I think it became clearer after each round that like, okay, this is like very much like a bit of a game, and maybe more art than science.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that has given me an additional agenda item to discuss, because I love talking about fundraising as a game and very much believe it completely as one. But maybe let's just rewind right to the beginning and just sort of like quickly step through the business's evolution vis-a-vis your different funding rounds. So I understand you did sort of 4 different funding rounds. Is that correct? Raised about a total of 19.3 million, just under 20 million across all the rounds.
Something like that. Yeah.
and you did a pre-seed, a seed, then something like a very large seed, pre-A, and then an A. Yeah. Okay. So let's just step through each of those rounds. And I know some of this was quite a long time ago, so no worries if you don't remember every single detail. That's not the point. Just to kind of give the audience a flavor of when you started, where you're at, where the business was at, the kind of rough metrics you may have had, and anything else you can share. And I also understand some of it will be probably confidential. So you founded the business technically in what years when you started it?
I think I would count it from the moment where like we had our first people full time, which was May of 2018.
Okay. So May of 2018, and then you do your first kind of pre-seed towards the end of 2018?
It was actually, so we closed the pre-seed before.
Okay.
I think shortly before, actually. So that was kind of like our trigger, right? So like if we close the pre-seed, then we will be able to go full time, and that's what happened. So I think we closed it more or less right before.
Yeah. So I'm just checking my notes. Yeah. And this is after you'd left Pipedrive after being there for quite a while and helping them scale the business. And that's where some of the insights for this business obviously
Absolutely.
came from, right?
Absolutely. I think I'm not sure if Klaus would have existed without Pipedrive, because like that's where like me and my, let's say, business co-founder Kair, where we learned how SaaS works, how doing it internationally works. So it was a very, very important experience. And most of the co-founders of Pipedrive also ended up as angel investors in Klaus. So it was definitely like a next generation growing out of Pipedrive in many ways. And we had loads of people that were former Pipedrive employees that joined us later.
Okay, excellent. Well, we may dive back into that a bit more as well. So that pre-seed round was in 2018, and then the next round, which I think when we were having our pre-call was in 2019. That one felt, it sounds like quite easy, like things were sailing at that point, and that's the round when Creandum led the round. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about that round, just 20, 30 seconds, and then we'll go to the next and the next, and then we'll rewind.
Yeah,
it was
like I think like 2019 was when we were at this like sweet spot for like what everybody expected us to be for that stage. So we had, built the working product. It wasn't like the MVP anymore. We closed a couple of large customers, like good logos, had a team. I think 2019 was the moment where we like ticked every single box, and that's kind of like why it was fairly easy, and like we got many term sheets almost immediately.
That's excellent. Okay. And I think this is probably where we'll spend a lot of our time today. But then you were growing through 2020. I think you made some changes in the business. You didn't raise through 2020 or 2021, and then you raised again in 2022 in a pretty tricky environment. Is that right? That's the next raise, or there were
no, so I think it was 2019. We raised 2020. Was COVID? It was 2020 or 21? 2020. Then it was 2020, I think, when we started
the seed 2. Yeah, the big seed, which looked like an A from a side. It was like 5.4 million, something like that.
Yeah. So we didn't know what to call it. Anyway, we started fundraising at the height of like COVID uncertainty, which was like unfortunate timing, but worked out in the end. And then the next time we started fundraising when the war had started, which was another like the worst couple of moments in this five-year period to fundraise, but worked out.
That's wild. And so that final round was 12 million.
I think so.
Yeah. And then you were building the business, scaling the business, and ultimately sold to Zendesk a handful of years after that.
Yeah. Actually, it was like barely a year after, because we started fundraising like in the middle of, we basically like closed around towards the end of 22, and then the M&A happened more or less a year after.
Okay. So just a quick recap for the audience. 2018 pre-seed round, all angels, a bunch of strategics from Pipedrive, and basically the market that you knew so well that understood the problem you were solving. Was there an institutional investor in that initial pre-seed? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. There was Icebreaker led our pre-seed and stayed on until the very end. Very, very good friends of ours. I ended up being an LP in two of their like funds actually. So Icebreaker is extremely well known to us and very, very good friends.
Great. Well, yeah, I remember you explaining how helpful they were and how close you became. That's amazing. You went the full circle and ended up investing as an LP. So where are they based? Why were they so amazing? Why were they so kind of influential for you?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously we didn't know at the time because we didn't have that much experience with VCs, but like looking back, like they ended up being like one of the best, most uh, one of the best investors that I have ever come across, because like first of all there was like a personality match. Our like the main guy on Icebreaker side Aleksi Partanen, is a Finnish guy, share a bit of a twisted sense of humor, and they're Finnish originally, we're Estonian, which is like, for those of you that don't know, like Finland and Estonia are like quite similar in like language and culture, like mentality. So there was like that match as well, which I think contributed quite a lot. Icebreaker now invests in Finland, Estonia, and Sweden. I think every single investment is from these three countries.
Okay. Very cool. So like cultural understanding, cultural nuance, technical understanding, like it just felt like a match across multiple levels.
And I think like I'm sure that you talk about this a lot as well on the podcast, but the fact that Aleksi had been a founder and had a successful exit on his resume makes a big difference. So like the difference between a VC that has never done it, but shows up to board meetings to give you advice anyway, makes a big difference.
For sure. Okay, great. So Icebreaker led that initial pre-seed 2018, then 2019, you got a bunch of different term sheets. Why did you choose Creandum to lead that round?
Well, first of all, shout out to Lauri, who I think he was with Creandum at the time, also an Estonian guy, but that's a coincidence. He, like, for whatever reason, like reached out the same day where we had internally decided that, like, all right, like now it's kickoff, like now we're starting to fundraise. And that same day, Lauri emailed like, hey, what are you guys up to? And I think the main thing was that they were quick. We did get term sheets from other really good funds, so it wasn't an easy decision at all, actually. Like we had like the luxury of choosing between really good funds in that round. But what made the difference really was that I think it was like Monday was first contact, and by Friday we had gone through all the motions, gone to Stockholm, met the entire Creandum team. So it like went from 0 to 100 like within 5 working days. Speed, it's like, and that was the same with Icebreaker actually. Like I think I think we technically didn't have like term sheets on the table, but like we probably would have gotten more. But Icebreaker was like this. I remember that there was another fund that reached out to us months after we had closed around and said like, hey, like can continue talking now. But we were like, well, closed around, got an office and hired people already. You're a little bit late. So I feel like, there's recently, especially, there's a lot of talk about like, US versus Europe, but I think this is for sure something that Europe is lacking in, is that a lot of the VCs especially, they're quite slow. Like there isn't this urgency, the same kind of urgency that you see in the US.
Yeah. Well, I reached out to Laurie before this call, and he similarly shared some incredible feedback about why they went in this round, which I'll come back to. But when I was researching, it was really funny. Lori had actually proactively reached out to me to ask me about my potential funding round at Acasa back in like 2018. So clearly he's just, one of those VCs that's like on it, hunting all the time. And so my next thread was, hey, I'm interviewing Martin. Would you mind sharing any information? He sent me 3 chunky paragraphs, which were all frankly like singing your praises. And I was like,
Wow.
damn, he wrote me, spent time writing me detailed feedback for this interview when I hadn't talked to him in like 4 or 5 years, like within 24 hours. So
Wow.
bit of a legend. And yeah, I've been involved with some other companies that have been backed by Creandum. So definitely a group I want to get to know better.
I mean, like it's
great.
like the Grand portfolio is like in Europe at least, it's like second to none, more or less.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then you stepped into the game with, I guess, Ali Samwar's outfit, correct? Global Founders Capital, or am I mistaken? Okay. So tell me a little bit about that round, and then we'll go on to some of like the deeper content and deeper dive stuff.
I think that was maybe less eventful because the first 2 were like, are we going to survive? What is this even?
It was that scary, yeah? Are we going to survive? That kind of vibe.
I mean, before being able to raise, before certain things happened, like when we went out to raise, we were already, pretty sure that we're in a good spot. But like, it was much more existential in the earlier rounds, whereas like the third and the fourth, it was more like, okay, like we've done more of what we have before. We've scaled further, built more product. So I think it wasn't from like a story perspective, it wasn't as interesting maybe, but I do remember it was hard. We had to go through loads of leads because the COVID and as well the fact that we were like in this in between stage. We wanted to raise early, make sure that we're good, but because the metrics and the timing was like, late seed, but not quite that I think was not in our favor because the A round investors thought that like we're maybe not quite mature enough, and maybe the seed investors thought that we're too mature. So that's I would say like as far as like sharing war stories, that this one wasn't quite as fascinating, but definitely an important round and got us to the next stage.
Yeah. And was there like a single point of contact there that you were dealing with mostly at GFC?
Yes, Philip, and yeah, I think in that case it was just impressive that he went very deep. Like he really understood nuances of the business very quickly, more so than you would assume that somebody from the outside can even. So I think I remember that was impressive.
Yeah. The only person I ever ended up meeting at GFC was Ali Samwar. And I remember being admittedly pretty nervous, to be honest, before meeting him. And I due diligence them with a company we were looking to partner with, who they backed, who ended up being our ultimate acquirer. Good Lord. The way you described Philip, who I don't know, when I met Ali, I was astounded. Like within 1 hour, depth of understanding he had and how what I was building and the multiple markets intersected with, it was just like this constellation of understanding of all the moving parts where I just left. Like, I mean, I have goosebumps on my arms. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to fundraising, but like I was just shocked at Ollie's and GFC's breadth and depth of understanding in a market where I didn't expect them to even have a tremendous amount of knowledge.
Yeah, me and Kai, we also met Ollie and a couple of times actually, and had a similar experience.
Okay, and then just to round off, the Series A happened in 2022 with Acton Capital, Creandum, Icebreaker, GFC. All your previous investors backed you again, and that's what took you through, I guess, the full arc to the end of the rainbow. Yeah, very cool. Okay, well, now we can get into a little bit of fun stuff in the last kind of 10, 15 minutes. Not that this wasn't fun. This was great. So there's a couple things I want to dive into, and I know a couple subjects you want to talk about as well. So the one I want to kind of surprise you with, which I hope will be enjoyable for us both, and I'm going to share my screen, is the transition from your original brand to your second brand, and frankly, how you codified the problem statement, because I was mind blown at where you got to. And I know I asked you to give me the deck that was like V0.1 during the raise, and then the one that you closed with, and I found it just unbelievable, the evolution of how you were telling your story. It was very, very impressive, and I'd love to just dive super deep into how you basically did that. And it's this, actually, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to show the couple slides in order first. Okay. So you started by being called Quality Kitten.
That's correct.
Cute. Last name's Cats. I love cats. So on brand for me. So this was your opener. I love it. The cat image stayed the same in the next brand, but I think it's just very, and I get it, because this first deck is you more structurally crafting your thoughts, but this is how you kind of codified your problem statement. What's the point? Hundreds of thousands of companies are migrating to SaaS help desk solutions. Currently, 300,000 accounts are on leading solutions and growing super duper fast. Lots of contenders out there. Just, I guess, making the point that there was lots and lots of stuff going on and companies growing. It was interesting to see how early you called out Zendesk, who ultimately was your acquirer. And then you get into the specific problem point about like, what are actual customer service people talking to their customers about, and how do you manage that at scale to get any degree of insight to basically run a better CS function in a business. So I'm just going to maybe go to your next slide, because rather than get you to break this down just yet, this is the next brand before you even get to close. And just remind me, this is the pre-seed round deck, or this is the seed round deck?
This is all pre-seed.
This is the one with the pipe drive angels and icebreaker that ends up doing this round.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
fine.
So it's like the first name change from Quality Kitten to Qualitista happened all before pre-seed was closed even.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to see first time experiment. I wish I had a drum roll, because honestly, I think this next slide is so badass, dude. So the next slide is FOMO. It's so brilliant and so meta to put in front of a VC. Obviously, we're basically driven by FOMO. And you got to.
The original version was like FOFU, actually.
Yeah.
Guess what the F stands for.
And you dialed it down a little bit, yeah?
We dialed it down.
Okay. So this just like blew my mind, because when I was looking through your decks, honestly, I pretty much felt like I didn't need to see the rest of the deck with my investor hat on, seeing this slide, because, the way you frame this, and then this second quote, I realized we have 50,000 conversations with customers every month, and I have no idea what we are telling them. That gives me massive fear of messing up. Was unbelievable. So how did you get to this synthesis?
I think we were trying to, even though I said that like it got more like that in later stages, but I think we were trying to, distill it down to the sort of emotion, like driving this problem, and like this fear, and getting to it was somewhat easy, because I was living that problem, because my previous role had been global head of customer support at Pipedrive, and it's not like the situation was very close to like what is described in the example. So I think I was really just trying to define like why is it even that I worry about like what the product is solving, like the problem that the product is solving. So this became like the purest way that we could express it. Like what is it's not so much like the sort of technical description, but like the description of the underlying strong emotion, right?
So like the felt experience of this kind of critical role across a bunch of mega orgs. So I feel like I could almost do an entire podcast just on this slide, and maybe we do a follow-up one. But, the step change from these specific issues, which feel, basically like technical, to this much more emotive one, what you say makes complete sense. But was it getting to this actual language? Do you feel it was more because of having loads and loads of customer conversations, or more because you iterated the deck 10 times and talking to investors? I'm sure it was a combination, but I'm just curious, like what were the inputs that got you to crystallize? Because this slide gives me goosebumps, and is what my favorite mentor and investor, Gabby Kahane, calls a brain harpoon. Right. This is like, you're now living rent free in my mind with this statement. But like, I'm curious, like, from a more nuanced perspective, do you remember how you like landed on this? Because this is powerful.
I think it was iterating after talking to lots of investors. Yeah. Or I don't know how. Maybe it wasn't that many, but it was definitely through that, because that's what we were doing in that moment. So like in our minds, it was all very clear. We didn't really have like much of a doubt about like whether this is a big problem. It was only about like, how do we express it like in a crystal clear way? And I'm guessing it also helps that me to a lesser degree, but Kair especially, has a marketing background. So like presenting ideas and communicating in a way that is clear has been a part of our work life for forever and ever. It's like the simplest rule, but even professionals go against it, is that like you should try to make things as simple as possible and reduce the noise. So like if we compare these two slides, then the first option said a lot of things, but most of it noise. And I think we like cleaned it for the signal to come through.
Makes tons of sense. I mean, one thing I talk about on the podcast with clients and my own raises is part of the reason I actually freakishly love fundraising so much is having had a sales and a marketing background, having built a B2C product technology offering. What I realized is I think fundraising is actually an incredible tool to go through the feedback loops of build, measure, learn in terms of your messaging, because investors understand go-to-markets and ICPs in a way that obviously your customers don't. Sometimes your team doesn't. And the investors put this kind of different pressure on you to figure out how to crystallize your story. And I can see it in your deck. My assumption is there's a positive circular feedback loop between running a fundraise really well and the iterations you're doing, how you're messaging to customers, how you're improving your business model. And this is something I think that's widely misunderstood, or even not even understood at all, about fundraising. Is I see it as investors are like your second layer of customer, and using them in the right way at the right time. And even the process of talking to people who ultimately don't invest can actually drive a ton of value into the actual business.
Absolutely. And I remember that in the later rounds, we had quite a few dry runs as well, like with our, maybe like pretty much like all the investors that we had at the time. Like then we did dry runs with like other folks on their team that didn't really know us. So to get like unbiased feedback, and it was always super helpful. And I will also say that maybe it changes if you've done it 10 times, but like within 4 funding cycles, it never felt like, oh, it's easy now, or like we have it perfect. It was always like an iterative process. And maybe even if the deck, it was maybe easier to, take the previous round deck, update it a little bit, know that you have like a good thing, but like the actual pitch, it was always felt a little bit like starting from zero, because you are describing a new moment, a new stage. So like the things that were impressive 2 years ago might not be and probably aren't impressive anymore. So if you're like, what is wow in seed is not impressive at all at A, as far as like metrics, for example.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to dive into a couple other points of conversation, and then we'll probably be able to wrap up. So one just quick one that I just thought was fascinating as a kind of a live learning and in doing the research to come into this chat with you was I'd been using my fundraising custom GPT and I'd been prompting and reprompting and going like deep into these different nested rabbit holes. And my GPT ended up telling me that I think they said they gave Icebreaker this amazing quote about how impactful that slide was. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I have to find this in the press. Where was that? And ultimately, in continuing to do research, actually desktop research plus using my AI, it was like, oh, sorry, we hallucinated that based on your inputs because I said this slide is a freaking brain harpoon. This is like amazing. So as a note to myself and everyone out there, trust your AIs within reason. Because I was about to kind of give maybe my insight on your presentation, that credit to someone else, which is interesting.
Hopefully, Alexa would still agree.
Yeah, I think so. So maybe we can just touch on this one quickly. I also went through 3 brands before my exit, and I found it really interesting. Quality Kitten, Qualitista, and then Klaus. So just maybe in quick fire bites, like did changing the brand help drive the fundraising momentum and business momentum, or did some of the fundraising challenges drive the brand needing to shift? How and is having the right name and the right brand critical for raising capital?
Yeah, so, not so much for fundraising to like a lesser degree maybe, but mostly for customers. So like Quality Kitten, the story is simple. Like we had another attempt at building a applicant tracking system actually with Kyle called Job Kitten. That's where the cat came from. So when we started, like this was just a project that wouldn't know whether it will take off. So we were like, okay, let's just like use the old brand, like whatever, like nobody knows this. So we turned Job Kitten into Quality Kitten, put some glasses on the cat, and we were done. And then we, the first person to see like the Quality Kitten brand, it was somebody that we knew and respected. It was like also like a very nice person, said like cool product, but like kind of a stupid name. We were like, okay, like if even he's saying that, then we probably need to like regroup here. So we came up with Qualitista, which is, more sophisticated, like barista and quality for quality or something. Fashionista or Qualitista, smart, but nobody could spell it because there's too many similar letters there in the middle. So you end up with Qualista most of the time. I even remember somebody reaching out and saying like, hey, I saw you're building something. I can't pronounce this, but I want to invest. That type of thing, like an angel investor. And that was the moment. Even our existing investors got it wrong, and we're like, this is just not. It's not good if people just keep misspelling it. So we had just closed our seed, and we figured it's now or never. Like it's gonna be like even harder to change your name because it's a lot of like admin work. We decided that we're gonna call the business Klaus because that's the name of the cat internally. That's what we called the cat. I remember I did like one little test. I compiled a list of 10 friends, some of them different nationalities, and I called them and I said, hey, I'm going to tell you our new names, text it back to me to see whether they get it right. And like a few of them used C instead of K, but mostly they got Klaus, so we're like good enough.
Okay, fun. Awesome. All right. So I guess we're at the end here. Let me do a little quick fire round with you, like 5 questions. Pre-fundraise investor updates and meetings with investors to keep them warm before you raise. Super important or total farce? Waste of time?
I think that's a a myth that benefits the VCs, like have everything like handed to you on a platter at all times. But like at the end of the day, like if you want to keep every single VC up to date on everything that happens, then you're going to be spending time that should be spent elsewhere. And like we were pretty strict about it. And we like outside of the fundraising period, like, okay, like if somebody came to us proactively and was like somebody we like, we maybe would do the first call with them, but we would, we were quite strict about like not spending time on fundraising when we were not fundraising. And at the end of the day, I do not believe that, if that's not what's going to matter, like what's going to matter is substance.
Makes total sense. Anything you'd have done differently in your pre-seed or seed round with the benefit of hindsight?
Difficult to say because, things worked out. So raising more, I think, is always a good idea. Just like if you think that, we can manage with, amount X amount, see if you can get more. Because like from what I understand, most VCs are happy to give you more money, but not necessarily, that everybody's chasing a certain equity position. Well, like getting more money is way easier most of the time. And like it did happen to us that like the pre-seed round that we raised had some product issues and ended up like cutting our runway in half more or less because we had to go back to zero and then start from scratch. So cash is oxygen. So if you can, don't mess with the oxygen supply, and like more is better always.
That quote, I remember you sharing that with me before. Okay, last few things. So a favorite founder or favorite investor to follow that you think people should be aware of at the moment?
Well, I can only say Icebreaker because that's just top of mind. We've been talking about them this entire time, and I think they're great.
Awesome.
Like in our region, at least, I think they're most prolific probably as well.
Okay, great. I'll put all the investors we chatted about in the show notes as well. So where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
LinkedIn.
Perfect.
No, not really. I'm not really active anywhere. I mean, I'm not active on LinkedIn either, but like I do go on LinkedIn.
Cool. And do you have any ask or anything you want to share with the audience as the final comment?
Not really. Congratulations on the podcast. I think this is great what you're doing. I watched episode number 1. I think this the concentrating on this like early stage, I think is super valuable. It's not talking about just like big general things, but like actual helpful advice, like things I wish I would have known when I was raising my pre-seed.
Thank you very much, sir. You're reducing my FOMO with that feedback. Thank you. All right, Martin, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And just also excited to see where you take your career from here and what's next.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Ciao.